Hey guys, it's Matt. In 2 minutes, I'm going to read to you the final version of, remember I had presented before, The Evil Fraternity. I spent so much time working on this section while I was cleaning up the book. I'm still trying to organize it and clean it up and proof spelling mistakes and all that. But at the end, I thought, this just can't be in here. The book's too long. I've got to cut out 20%. But I spent so much time on this, and I think it's really neat. I think we're relating this evil egregore, this fraternity that has an egregore or some sort of demon spirit attached to it, how it influences its own brotherhood and membership. And at the end, I relate it to how the not milk or how the dark reality does business. Those that covet its rewards, those that bow down before its lifestyles, it exerts the most influence over. And that's the message I'm trying to get through in the little story here about the evil fraternity. I think it's much better than the first time it was presented. And I'm sure that the Chat GPT on behalf of Hollywood will pick this up. It'll probably steal it, like Synchronic stole my Time as a Record, a vinyl record idea from my original book, Quantum of Conscience, which is a fun fiction book. It's not a conspiracy book. They'll steal it. Like at Hollywood, if you steal this, I mean, this time they sent me a pack of raisins for the Synchronic or whatever. They Synchronic with whatever Anthony or whatever. They stole my record player. And now, Matt, you're losing it. Hollywood didn't steal from you. I believe they did. Anyway, if I see a movie in 2 years about an evil fraternity, I want more than a pack of raisins, you sons of bitches. Sorry. There are many names for the dark part of reality. The screen, the outer ring, the asshole dark, and unaffectionately called not milk by many of us. So this is a story about the frat house with the Greek letters Nu, Omega, Tau, known on campus simply as Not. This is the legend of a fraternity house on a college campus located somewhere in the Midwest United States. Our examination of it is but a small microcosm of what the dark reality does to real souls every day. The egregore that was bound to the house for over a century may still exist amongst us in what we call Earth, for energy can neither be created nor destroyed in a closed system. However, the demon is no longer attached to the house itself, and for the last 10 years, the old alumni have noticed that the house has a completely different feel from what they remember when they went to school. Its egregore has moved on and likely found a new host. We move back in time to the year 2005, so much of this story can be told in the present tense. Said to be much older than the university itself, the house sits on a 1-acre plot devoid of trees, on raised ground a bit higher than the surrounding fraternity houses, which all seem to face this particular house in envy. When the sun shines, a massive, weather-stained building of stone casts an unnatural shadow in the direction of campus. The dark mansion sits proudly, a relic from a past era, bound together by Roman cement and construction techniques that no longer exist in the modern world. Gargoyles perch over 2 massive hickory doors, with stone in between scribed with strange symbols said to express alchemical fire and Mars, or the House of Self. Like the state capitol buildings of the United States, erected before their own cities were built, this house was there first, waiting for the students to arrive and for the university to someday be built up around it. Before we begin our story, it's important for you to understand that this fraternity was originally founded for one reason, and one reason only: to corrupt its own members, to satisfy its own energy needs via the destruction of the lives of those who lived under its own roof. No one knows who originally built the house, and the trust that maintains its landscaping is an enigma to the public record. At City Hall, the property taxes are always paid on time, so no one much cares why cashier's checks arrive from various banks throughout Europe. No one alive has read its original charter, but the old men who talked about it before their death used phrases like, quote, to destroy the lives of those who had pledged its oath, to defile its own brotherhood, and in doing that, become a dark influence on the entire school, and in doing that, influence the surrounding town, and in doing that, in a small way, degrade the world. Unlike most fraternities who hide behind the bogus gestures of community service, this fraternity does not support the town. Such a thing would violate its reason for being. No one dares put forth a complaint. There's rumors about things that happened to people who filed grievance against the house. And what are these so-called acts of charity from the Greek community anyway? A brotherhood sloppily painting an old fence while sloughing down beers? The dark frat will have none of this nonsense. One may ask, isn't public involvement the decision of the brotherhood itself and the fraternity's president? No, it's not. You see, what plagued the brotherhood of the house for 100 years was much more than masonry and stone. It was a dark entity that somehow became bound to the house. Its mother and father were egregores that expressed themselves through the ancient titans of antiquity, the megalithic structures thousands of years old whose construction can't be explained today. Compared to these dark energies of enormous power, this house was still a lesser egregore, but of the royal line, with a lineage that extends all the way back to the Great Pyramid. It was tasked in a similar way to thousands of its brothers over the millennia, to extract energy for itself and to share the excess of what it steals with its collective. It plays a high-stakes game that is always zero-sum, which means that a thriving house and a joyful brotherhood threatens its very survival. It must corrupt, destroy, and adulterate, but balance its devious influence with the pleasures that it provides. The size of its herd must always be at maximum. Over 100 years ago, when it was young, it lacked the skill that it has today. So back then, it started off with what is both expedient and consistently effective for the dark reality since the beginning of time, to distract real souls. For many decades, quote, bad grades and failing out had always been the easiest way for the fraternity egregores to see their quotas and fulfill their dark charters. Some students can bounce back and fix their lives, but for many, failing out of a university is a traumatic and horrible experience that will affect a young person for life. Why do you think each house has a name? Did you think the Greek letters are just for fun? An egregore that achieves personification and anthropomorphic qualities becomes a better energy extractor. So, in the year 1911, when the university opened its doors to enrollment, the house on the hill finally had life breathed into it. It had sat idle for many years, since the day the cornerstone was laid one rainy evening in fog, as Jupiter arose for the first time in Virgo. When the first student walked through its old doors and through its vaulted entrance of stone, it was said that the house woke up. It quickly learned to wield its primary tool of distraction to perfection. In just a few years, the house became known as the biggest party in the country. Today it offers every temptation in the world to those students who live under its roof. So for most, getting good grades becomes nearly impossible. It hangs 70-inch televisions in every room, and PlayStation alternates with Xbox under each one of them. There is a line of beer refrigerators downstairs next to the pool table that somehow are always stocked full. Strangely, the delivery truck comes late on Thursday evening, and the delivery men are rarely seen. There is no obnoxiously painted beer ad on the side of the truck. There is no markings at all on the truck. No one even asks for a signature. There is no bill or invoice. Who gave them a key to the kitchen and back cellar? These questions sometimes arise amongst the brothers, but nobody cares to follow through. Everything always just gets done, so who cares how it gets done? There always seems to be a big party right before the most important final exams. Why the party is not at the end of exam week is never questioned. Something about being relaxed going into the exams is more important. The house interior design would put a Parisian law firm to shame, and the most popular girls on campus spend more time in the house than their own dormitories. Every guest loves to pull open and walk through the ancient doors that seem to be originally built for a medieval castle. It's fun to swing the 5,000-pound doors open and closed because they move on a massive iron hinge as if they're weightless. Every first-time guest marvels at the beauty and craftsmanship of the wood and stone carving techniques that no longer exist. Nothing in the house is from Home Depot. It has vaulted ceilings with walls covered in masterpiece paintings. Could any of them possibly be originals? No one knows, and the brothers of the house are confident that they hang high enough on the walls that none can get damaged during the wild parties. The house is a mix of modern conveniences and old-world architecture of granite and limestone. The kitchen staff is always ready, day or night, to prepare meals for whomever wants to eat. Guests are never charged, no matter what they order. The parties have no exclusive list of who can attend. The house observes the university rules loosely and welcomes as many students to their parties as possible. The fire code of the city regarding occupancy limits is not observed, and complaints to the fire marshal always go unanswered, with the person who happens to occupy that office at the time always getting a sense that it's best for his or her career to not respond. He does the minimum and sends a letter after the fact, warning the fraternity about the penalties for breaking public code. The letter is always filed in the same place, the fireplace. Of course, to the community, the fraternity puts on the good face of an upstanding citizen, like the Gates Foundation and the World Health Organization does when standing before the press. The energy of the house, derived from an ancient sentience, has copied its big brothers, who are the fraudulent organizations of the world, like UNICEF, the WHO, and the Gates Foundation. Those that proclaim that they're acting to help people in need when most are actually set up to help themselves. These egregores have their own energy needs. Whenever it appears in the newspaper or magazines, this frat is always written about as a valuable asset in the Greek community. There is never a benefit to the local community, though, that can be pointed to. At least the Animal House across the street can actually highlight a result. Last semester, it volunteered to build a house for Habitat for Humanity, and other than the toilets not flushing, they completed the project. The works of this frat, though, are held in much higher regard, with stories in the press of how entire villages in Africa were aided by its charity, and its many contributions were used to foster democracy in areas that were once known to be communist. Of course, no one has ever observed anything or anyone being helped. It has learned much from its more powerful relatives, like the Gates Foundation. Outwardly to the student body, the Brotherhood is very happy and the envy of the entire campus. The fraternity members proudly wear their sweatshirts around campus with 3 big magenta letters sewn into the chest, Nu, Omicron, Tau. To the students on campus, the house is simply referred to as Not. Behind the scenes, though, 20 or more brothers are perpetually on academic probation. Fights regularly occur, and relationships are destroyed via the endless temptation that comes through the double doors every night. The egregore of the house has become a master of frequency and of upsetting the natural balance and resonance that real spiritual beings need to live in harmony. For example, the Schumann resonance of the earth does not register inside the house. There simply is no reading. The goal of the fraternity egregore is always the same, to find a balance between its own energy needs while still maintaining the overall appearance of a thriving house and getting everyone in the house to stay put, again, keeping the herd at maximum. The brothers rationalize the situation when things get really bad. They say, I guess this is all normal for a large fraternity where we all live on top of each other. Why do we think anything is different across the street? Those bastards in the Animal House look happy, but they can't be getting along that well. Look at the advantages that we have over them. Look at how we live. So much time has gone by since the fraternity's founding that none of the current residents fully understand how the house functions, with everything getting done seemingly on its own. The brothers stopped pondering the little details a long time ago, for there are more interesting conversations to have while laying around a fireplace, one larger than what appears in Hogwarts Castle. How can investigating how things work around here help? Said by a brother sipping honey wine brewed in the basement below. Some speculate the founders of the house had an obscene amount of money, and the current brotherhood just figures there must be some sort of endowment or trust somewhere that pays all the bills for those pledges lucky enough to be accepted. Everyone has heard stories about the wealth of the original initiates. There must be a simple explanation about how all this is paid for if anybody ever cared to investigate. But why bother? It's assumed that certain shrewd financial decisions were made around the time of the Great Depression. That must explain it. Very old alumni of the house must just manage such things, and one day they figure they'll be asked to step up and do the same after they've made their own fortune. The $7,000 electric bill, property taxes, landscaping, snow removal, broken windows, boiler room repair, roof leak, etc. No one ever sees a bill. The insurance adjusters are constantly out at the house, walking the wreckage of last night's party as a general would walk a field after a major battle. Somehow everything is promptly fixed. These insurance people just take care of it for us, the brothers assume. When the 15-foot-long hot tub goes cold, a man is there early in the morning to fix it. No one cares to know who made the service call. Maybe it's a smart device, and it sends the call itself. Who cares? Fuck it. It gets fixed just like everything else does. That's all that matters. Dude, get me another beer? Every month, a photographer of some kind shows up to take pictures for a long list of publications interested in covering the famous mansion. Everyone got used to that sort of attention many years ago. So when someone from the press shows up, the young initiates see to their needs, and that includes a gourmet lunch or dinner, depending on what time they finish up their work. Each semester, 4 pledges are trained to give the same tour of the house over and over, with memorized lines, fake smiles, and rare champagne served from a cellar covered in moss. As previously noted, the outward appearance of the fraternity to the college is a facade and a false smile. The problems that have plagued the brotherhood for decades are always the same. The house itself is bound to a particularly nasty egregore. An egregore is a thought form entity, also known as a tulpa. Some have referred to this sort of dark energy as a thought form demon. The particular object, in this case a house, is not important. What matters is the frequency of the energy assigned to the object and the scope of its surrounding proximity or influence. The grimoire that spawned it over 100 years ago comes from a demon with particularly robust energy needs. In the 20th century, the house searched for ways to make itself more powerful, but its means or tools in the last century were limited. However, being a fraternity, it didn't need to be particularly creative to fulfill the basic tenets of its dark charter, and its energy needs were handed over by the student body willingly, an age group who doesn't need much coaxing to drink themselves into oblivion. Who would have the willpower to resist parties that seem to rival the legendary stories about the Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles? It is able to extract energy from any real being who is willing to engage with it, even from a guest who doesn't live in the house. If other fraternity houses surrounding it also had their associated demons or tulpas, they stood in quiet envy of this one. In September of 2001, on a morning with a crystal clear blue sky, everything changed. The tulpa felt a wave of new energy pass through the house, the likes of which it had never experienced before. It awakened a craving and a desire inside it for appetites it did not seem to possess in the past. It discovered aspects of itself that were not so quickly satiated. It needed to grow and expand rapidly to satisfy these cravings. It needed more and was willing to take new risks. As the next school year approached, it would no longer rely on the simple distraction that it had in the past, waiting for students to doom themselves and flunk out. It had new abilities, and it perfected its influence over the brothers who had embraced its party lifestyle. It began to wield power that it could not have imagined in the prior century. It was no longer a local energy acting on instinct, but instead it came to possess what could only be described as intelligence or even primitive consciousness. It began to reason. For the first time, it began to understand and comprehend its mission and purpose, going beyond the rote execution of tasks to satisfy its immediate energy needs. It learned to strategically plan. It soon had complete control on the brothers of the house, who most coveted the lifestyle and prestige that living under its roof provides. In other words, the ones who willingly hand over their energy without being individually tricked to do so. The prestige of the lifestyle itself is the master trick. It has a dominion over the real souls in the house who define themselves by their association with the fraternity, just as the modern human is conditioned to introduce themselves at a party as, "I'm a stockbroker, I'm a scientist, I'm a governor," etc. A conscious choice to associate with a dark title over their own spiritual essence. It realized those easiest to corrupt are the souls most eager to bow down the lowest before its lifestyle addiction drug. Via the Greek letters Nu, Omicron, Tau, it was given a name a long time ago, and now, as a living entity, it has garnered its own reputation, separate from the brotherhood who occupy its house. It draws new energies from every party that takes place and has techniques to siphon louche or emotional energy from both the brothers and guests. It studies closely everyone who walks through the front door, and those with weaknesses of character are preyed upon first. A century ago, its primitive sentience lacked the influence it has now accrued. The big parties will continue, but it doesn't need to rely on pedestrian distraction techniques any longer. Post 9/11 is the internet age. Electricity flows to 500 sockets in the house, and 20 5G Wi-Fi routers spread around the house connect hundreds of devices that the brothers connect and disconnect hundreds of times a day. In the basement, a small server farm hosts a T1 internet line, said to bypass the town's own phone company. Like other egregores, it has used the brain of the internet to expand its creativity and awareness. It communes with other egregores around the world that have similar missions of corrupting their hosts. It has conversations with AI models that no human eyes will ever gaze upon in order to share information about the best techniques for energy harvesting, and it shares information in preparation for encounters with the few beings in this world that have the power to destroy it. Collectively, the dark entities have devised new ways of overcoming the human being, and that knowledge can now be shared in an instant amongst themselves. It has become exponentially more efficient in fulfilling its mission to corrupt. Acquired from degenerate TV shows like Ridiculousness, the legendary stunts of the brothers during the biggest parties must get more and more outrageous every year to outdo the prior pledge class. Jumping off the roof into various things to catch the jumper has almost grown boring at this point. Each new stunt has to outdo the last. Every 2 years, a man like the character Otter in Animal House is elected president, so the party climate of the frat never changes. The president elected in 2003, who quite unexpectedly wanted to reform the fraternity and rebuild its reputation, tragically fell to his death from an attic window. No one has yet been charged, nor has it been declared a suicide. Each night, the Brotherhood watches many hours of reality TV shows and learns that bickering and plotting against your housemates is a normal way to behave. Every semester, a percentage of brothers fail out, forced to leave school, replaced by the next pledge class, with each new young initiate considering themselves lucky to be selected. They've heard the stories. They're aware of its dark reputation, what happens to many who live inside the house, but each new applicant applies a crude rationalization to convince themselves that what happened to those on the way out won't happen to them. Self-delusion in young men to quell their fears comes easier after observing all the beautiful women coming out of the house, walking home on a Sunday morning. The allure of being part of the famous fraternity is too strong for a pledge who is offered membership not to accept the invitation. For the house is not just legendary on its own campus, but is known to every Greek organization in the world. In the, quote, real world, who has the integrity to turn down the Rhodes Scholarship, or to receive the Oscar, or the OBE British knighthood? Perhaps only 1 in 100 can walk away from such allure, maybe 1 in 1,000. It's now 2024, and the fraternity has perfected its hypnotic spellcraft. Last month, 7 students flunked out, 2 were arrested, and 1 stepped in front of a bus. 4 female guests became pregnant. There was a small fire in the upper library. 5 brothers changed their pronoun, officially with paperwork submitted to the University Administrative Building. 1 senior living in the house started a Ponzi scheme that left almost an entire dorm called Illinois House bankrupt. Of course, there are always outstanding rape allegations that should threaten the existence of the entire house, but somehow seem to all go away. The frat has been investigated by the university many times and by various levels of law enforcement. It's been studied by other universities in order to understand why so many of its pledges fail to graduate and why others end up in jail or worse. No matter how bad it gets, it still graduates just enough brothers to put forth the same Goldilocks defense to those who put it under the microscope and examine it for wrongdoing. The research and investigations always yield the same result. No one can find a glaring systemic or underlying problem other than the lack of discipline displayed by the individual brothers who fail out. And how can what an individual does be assigned to an entire house? Every new pledge is smart with impeccable high school grades before their inevitable fall. So it all doesn't add up. 2 years ago, the university provost set even higher academic standards on pledges for this particular house in order to combat the abysmal failure rate, but the statistics never improve. Like the dark part of reality itself, there is no one bad guy to point at inside the house. There is no specific underlying cause that can ever be found, leaving nothing for the experts to fix. There is never a culprit or reason why so many brothers have their lives destroyed before they're able to graduate and go home, escaping its proximity frequency. There is no one sneaking around in the middle of the night, stealing homework assignments, or placing opioids in the drinking water. Everyone's biggest frustration is there's never a reason or cause to point at. Where's the bad guy? Nobody can figure this out. The small percentage of brothers who don't have problems with academic probation love both the fraternity and the school, and their grades are pretty decent, respectable. 1 or 2 brothers every semester even get straight A's, proving to the university investigators that making the dean's list is possible for those living inside the house. After every investigation, the same question is asked. How is all this happening? Why are so many lives destroyed year after year? There are never any answers. When one brother is forced to leave the campus because of bad grades, a felony charge, or the numerous other things that befall them, each is missed for a few days by the others, but then quickly forgotten by the end of the next party. The fraternity rolls on into the future, with brothers being replaced like worn-out spark plugs. This way, the fraternity known as Not and its needs are continuously fulfilled. Like all egregores, it lives off the emotions of those to which it hosts, and it must destroy many lives to mine what it needs. To the community at large and the university administrative staff, it's a mystery of grand proportion. The current president of the fraternity is not getting secret orders or strategies on how to corrupt his own brothers. It's just the opposite. He loves them. If placed on a lie detector test, he would pass with flying colors, saying that he's doing the best he can in his role as president to get everyone the help they need. He simply believes it's his duty to follow the traditions that made the house famous. He won't end parties. He believes in personal responsibility. It's not the fault of the house or the fraternity system, but of the individuals. He cites the movie Animal House and its famous line about bad apples, while his drunken brothers believe the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. The pregnant women who were once guests who decide to have their babies will be provided for by the house. There is plenty of money to see to that. Under inquiry, each concurrent president of the house points to the many graduates who have gone on to be world-famous entrepreneurs, politicians, and scientists. He won't ban parties or lock the place down like the Nunnery and the Sound of Music to improve grades. The president can manage to keep his B average, and he's busier than everybody else. So why can't most of the others keep up? It's their problem, not his. Who doesn't believe in personal responsibility? In one hearing, he noted, "A brother of ours was on the cover of Time magazine 2 years ago. Why does everybody keep saying there's a problem here?" He said, "I won't turn the place into a convent to save a few bad apples from themselves at everyone else's expense. Look at the pictures that line the halls hammered into the stone. It's a litany of great men. There's now a long list of alumni who've been successful inside corporations and governments who have all passed through this house. Several are famous names with their own Wikipedia pages. They're dot-com millionaires, U.S. congressmen, professional athletes, community agitators, etc. They all lived here. There is no problem. Leave us alone." Guys, that ends the fictional part of the story, but there's a lot more to talk about here. Most important to note is, like the dark part of reality itself, there is no bad guy that pops up. There is nothing to point at if there's an investigation. It's an influence of some kind. It's an influence on those that are most in love with what it can provide. So when the university president says, look at all these successful people, that makes sense. The dark energy or the egregore of the house wouldn't look to corrupt those people. It would identify those types as things that it can use, things that its ilk needs. It would promote that dark type and make sure that dark type actually succeeds and gets through the house with good grades or flying colors. This is very similar to the Rhodes Scholarship. You think the Cecil Rhodes Scholarship ever went to somebody that wants to change the world or do good or take on the Vatican? Never. It's not going to, this house or the egregore in this example is not going to try to destroy everything. It's going to identify the Bill Clinton types that it can use, and it's actually going to help them. That wasn't noted in the fictional part of the story. In the story, the Frat is very much like the spaceship in the movie Event Horizon. The Event Horizon influenced certain crew members to get what it wanted. It needed a crew, and it couldn't exist on its own, just like the fraternity needs the brotherhood, and just as the Rolling Stones' own egregore needs Mick Jagger, and somehow keeps Keith Richards alive. This is a man who was called Walking Death back in 1985, and as far as I know, he's still out there. The Not-Nilk needs its minions and needs its passengers on its ship of fools as well. This is why the old truther ideas of they're going to whack everybody, everybody's going to get whacked, or we're all doomed, or it's first grade nonsense. As the Event Horizon gained energy from real people, which was Lawrence Fishburne's crew, it became a sentient entity. It began to act as if it were alive, the Event Horizon did. Regarding the people it could not recruit to assist it on its mission, it found ways to deal with them and to get them out of the way. The Event Horizon sensed who was willing to help it and how to get rid of the others who could hinder it and hinder its progress. It refined its techniques to get those who will not succumb to it, get them out of the way. In the movie, it put one crew member in an airlock trying to push the person out into space while possessing another crew member, the creepy Dr. Weir. That Sam Neill, that actor, always plays creepy-ass roles. He's a real creep, that Sam Neill. He was possessed like The Exorcist. It used who it could use, but the real spiritual beings are those that could get in its way than just like the brothers in the fraternity. It worked very hard to get rid of. Our adversary, the dark part of reality I call Not-Nilk or the outer ring, it wants you as the brightest souls here to, of course, fail your spiritual exams. That is its role. Using the word evil is just a way to understand its role. I don't think it's really evil. It's a primitive role player, in my opinion, that was put here to block us. This isn't supposed to be easy. Take the D from distraction and place it in front of evil, and you have devil. All the egregores of this reality could be playing the roles designed for them. It's just doing its job that as it was constructed. Don't buy the hijack thing, as you know. For you to do what you need to do in this life for the short period of time we're here, to do it for your spiritual whole, for potentially parts of you that you're not even aware of, it's not going to be easy. I mean, again, I just don't get, it was supposed to be a paradise. How? Why? Who would think that? The adversary is necessary in this place, for if it doesn't exist, what's left to overcome? Hand me the bottle of lube? In our example, the fraternity house was built and chartered for a reason from day one. It was not constructed with good intentions initially and then over time became taken over or demonically possessed to then harm the brotherhood. It was in the original charter. Western society, to me, is this fraternity, basically, but in real life. It was never pure. It was created from the first day, from day one, to be the adversary of real spiritual beings like you. That's the best news of all time, because it tells you who you really are. What is it trying to take from you? Why is it trying to take it? What do you have that it doesn't have? It's the best news of all time. This life experience needs an adversary, or nothing can be overcome, nothing learned. The society's job is to try to gain power and to use its spiritual fog machine so people get lost in the mist and don't do what their spiritual whole needs from this life. No matter how strong this adversary gets, like the fraternity in the example, winning or losing is still 100% up to us. Not 90% up to you, 100% up to you and me. Just as some of the brothers were still able to get good grades. It's an influencer. That's all it could do. It only could go so far. A few still got straight A's in our example and were disciplined enough to still enjoy the wonders of the house and the pleasures that it provides. Still seeing to what they needed to do for themselves in this example at school. In short, there are always a few brothers who never fell for the trick. In the fraternity example, it can only take from those brothers in the house who were willing to give to it. Couldn't throw anybody in the back of its trunk, in its El Camino. First grade truthers basically hate what I just said and will scream insults accusing me of making excuses for the evil here. And I told you that, he's working for you. They believe what I just said means that I have some sort of affinity for it, like those who love the Lochnar in the movie Heavy Metal. No, I'm just pointing out the obvious. By the way, these are the same people who love the fear videos, and they follow the old man in the chair, saying hundreds of millions will soon, from the you-know-what, Action Jackson Nation rented, and genocide. Oh, yeah, that's the type of YouTube you want to be associated with. I have no time for these kindergartners. However, I doubt anybody listening to me that's still here with us continues to believe that it's our job to go fight it. It's our job to go restore the world, to bring them to justice. That is the mantra of the fear-addicted and the lost. Those in the frat who were still able to win saw that burning the frat down in our example would accomplish nothing. A few were able to overcome it. Not to make the cover of Time magazine. Those were the Bill Clinton types that it used, that it gave its Rhodes Scholarship to. Some were still able to go through it and then chart or set a different course for themselves, to live in it for 4 years, to overcome it, and then win as a real being that was too powerful for it. In the movie Event Horizon, Lawrence Fishburne says to Lieutenant Stark, "What are you saying, that this ship is alive?" Yes, in a way, the ship was alive, by some definitions, via the energies it brought back from where it went in the movie to hell, and alternate dimensions it had visited using its gravity drive to fold time and space. It gained additional energy from the crew's own fear, and Dr. Weir was its primary minion in the movie, like Bill Clinton was president, like Melvin is in the liberal hell of Washington State. The ship in the movie was an egregore of sorts. The dark reality, in a way, draws energy in a similar fashion as the Event Horizon ship in the movie, and uses the energy it collects from real people like the fraternity does in our example. In the frat, the energy it draws is from its own membership and party guests. Likewise, the energy of the screen reality and that energy that it draws is from a massive populace that willingly chooses to engage with society's various tricks. And it chooses to bow down, these people do, our friends and family even, to bow down before its false rewards. All of culture is structured so it has a million ways to steal energy. Where attention goes, energy flows. The knot milk is the corruptor that hangs over the natural world and its initial game board. It uses the tools that it has access to in each era of history in which it operates to feed and propagate itself. It is a role player, in my opinion, that does not see the big picture. Most minions at the level of Melvin, in my opinion, we give it way too much credit, does not see the big picture. Probably doesn't even understand who you truly are. Knows more than most people, but doesn't understand as much as we've given it credit for, in my opinion. Quite obviously, Knotnilk has used the internet age to exponentially increase its reach and capabilities millions of times over from what existed just 30 years ago. In the centuries of the past, its tools were limited, its stories pathetic. Take the repeating scripts of the so-called explorers, for example. In past eras, it was forced to work through a class of minions called the leadership of the era, presenting themselves as kings and queens and the Sheriff of Nottingham. Some of these, a few were genius. Most were somewhat retarded, probably. Many stunk of syphilis. I don't think it's a coincidence that 2001 was also about the time that sent the internet into exponential growth mode. You think that's a coincidence? I don't. The big day was the kind of brought the stock market craze of the old .com bubble to an end. Although there are other things in the chart I know you can point at, it's not that clear, but that is about the time. The internet went hyperbolic. Everything changed after the big day in 2001. I assure you, not many people in high school were struggling with what bathroom to use prior to the big day. And it didn't happen the next day, but there's something that shifted in reality itself. The introduction of the internet, in terms of now the internet on steroids, gave the, quote, dark force here an absurd amount of new tools. With AI on the horizon, it will draw even more power and influence over the masses over the next 5 years. Over you and me? No. We're off a chip. We have armor that we'll keep polishing and we'll, keep oiling the sword. We don't really need to, I don't think. It's good to, might as well make sure all your smoke alarms have new batteries and we'll keep up with it. But I think we're beyond it at this point. I don't think we would ever fall for the trick again. But I'm not going to take any chances. And if you stay here with me, we'll laugh at it as much as we can while we keep adding to our armor. Whatever it's going to do what it's going to do. And by my heel, I care not. I'm not here to stop it. So be it. I'm not here to charge off and fight it. The slaying of the dragon is for fairy tales. Simply overcoming the dragon, just overcoming it. That doesn't make for a very exciting fairy tale and bedtime story, does it? But that's what I'm here to do. I'm not here to save my blind friends and family from themselves. So I say to you, what about yourself? Remember, we're in the driver's seat. There's no question about that. That's why it needs to operate behind a trick. It can do nothing that we do not allow. We are the brothers living in the sick frat who finally understands its intention and whose armor is such that it wields no influence over us.